Okay, moving on to the next segment of today's show, I want to talk a little bit about last night's Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals between the defending NBA champion Toronto Raptors and the Boston Celtics. And in case you missed it, the Toronto Raptors ended up winning this Game 3 by a final score of 104 to 103 in just crazy, crazy fashion. It was a crazy game, not going to lie. The Celtics, for the third game in a row, came out guns blazing. They were up 5 after the first quarter. They were up 10 after the second quarter. And in the first half, the Celtics were playing pretty well. Kemba Walker was balling out. Jaylen Brown was scoring. Marcus Smart was playing some pretty solid defense. And it was a pretty impressive effort by the Boston Celtics, considering the fact that their best player, Jason Tatum, wasn't even that good. And going into this game, you expected the Toronto Raptors to come out as desperate as possible. This is a team that was down 2-0 to the Milwaukee Bucks last year in the Eastern Conference Finals and ended up coming back to win that series. This team is filled with guys with playoff experience. And when you look at this Toronto Raptors team, going into last night's game, it was very interesting because they're the defending NBA champions. You understand that. Going into this season, did I expect them to be an NBA championship contender for the second year in a row? No. And why is that? Well, obviously because they don't have Kawhi Leonard. And as much as I loved Kyle Lowry and Siakam, I just didn't necessarily know if this Toronto Raptor group had enough to win an NBA championship for the second year in a row. But then throughout the regular season, the Toronto Raptors played some really, really solid basketball. And for, the millionth year in a row, it seems like, over the last 10 years in reality, this Toronto Raptors team is always in the equation. They're one of the more well-run organizations in the NBA, and they're a consistently, good organization. And the Toronto Raptors this year, even without Kawhi Leonard, went 53-19 in the regular season, and they are one of the, truly one of the contenders in the Eastern Conference. But throughout the first 2 games of this series, the thing that I was concerned about with the Toronto Raptors, that I think the Boston Celtics have really shown, is that the Celtics have closers and playmakers on their team. When you have a top 3 of Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown, the way those 3 guys have played throughout the playoffs and throughout the restart, you saw the way they played against Philadelphia as Boston swept Philadelphia in the first round of the playoffs, and I understand you could technically say the same thing about the Toronto Raptors and the fact that they swept the Brooklyn Nets, but at the same time, even though Philadelphia is a mess, the difference in talent between the Philadelphia 76ers with Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Josh Richardson, that's pretty significant between the Brooklyn Nets B squad. That's just basically Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, and Joe Harris. But anyway, Boston, the first 3 games of the playoffs, came out firing to start. They were playing really well, and the fact that they were up 10 after half, if you were a Toronto Raptor fan, you would be feeling nervous. And going back to the first 2 games of the series real quickly, the reason why I liked Boston to win this series in 7, that was actually my pre-series, prediction for the Boston Celtics Toronto Raptors series. I picked Celtics in 7. And the reason for that was just because of their closers, because of Tatum, because of Brown, because of Kemba. And when you look at Toronto, as good as Lowry and Siakam and Van Vliet are, I haven't really seen them consistently make big shots in close games down the stretch. You kind of saw that last year. Kawhi Leonard was that main closer, alpha dog, which ended up leading the Toronto Raptors to an NBA championship. And in game 1 of this series, it was pretty obvious the Boston Celtics just came out and they were clearly the better team. And they did the same thing in game 2, but the one thing that was different about game 2 is that Toronto actually responded. Even though the Toronto Raptors didn't play, if you were to watch it with your eyes, it wasn't the best game they've ever played. And after you watched that game, you probably didn't say to yourself, wow, that Toronto Raptor team looked like a team that could win the NBA Finals and a team I feel confident about the fact that they'd play well. But they found themselves in that game down the stretch. And Boston, for the most part, it seemed like had a lead throughout the game. But it turned out that Toronto was, right in it down the stretch, and Kemba Walker just came through in the clutch as one of those closers we mentioned, and the Celtics ended up taking a 2-0 series lead. And that surprised me because looking at the Raptors, a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, counted them out, including me, really, as a final contender going into the regular season. And when you look at the Raptors now, it's kind of hard to do that going into game 2 and last night's game because they're the defending champs and they're in a good position right now, especially after the regular season ended, to be one of the main finals contenders in the Eastern Conference, and so in which I believe they are. But Toronto last night, there were multiple times throughout this game where you thought, wow, these guys could be in trouble. Even going into this game, when you considered how game 2 ended, you kind of thought, wow, maybe these Raptors could be in trouble. And even though Nick Nurse is really one of the 2 or 3 best coaches in the NBA, he won Coach of the Year this year, and throughout his first 2 years, he's done an absolutely phenomenal job as the head dog leading the Toronto Raptors. But at the same time, when you look at this Raptors team, last night they outscored Boston by 6 in the third quarter. And then when you look at their team totals and their total team stats, the Toronto Raptors last night shoot from 3, 30 of 14. That's 32.5%. Boston shot 31. So they were about even on threes, about even on field goal percentage. Boston really outshot them from the free throw line, but in the end of the game, it was Toronto that made the big play down the stretch. And in case you missed it, that final sequence, which people in Toronto are going to be talking about for a while, okay? There's about 20 seconds left. Toronto has just scored a basket to tie the game up at 101. Yeah, Boston has the ball with a 24-second shot clock, basically. It seems like if they make a shot, we're going home. And if they miss a shot, we're going to overtime. And Kemba Walker just has an absolutely beautiful bounce pass. It was like a no-look bounce pass to Daniel Tice. He saw his reaction was great. I don't necessarily know if he was expecting the ball to begin with, and he dunks it home to give the Boston Celtics a 2-point lead. Toronto calls a timeout. There's 0.5 seconds on the clock. So you're kind of thinking to yourself, wow, there's absolutely no way the Toronto Raptors are going to be able to come up with a shot here to tie the game. And if they do, it's going to have to be a tip-in. With 0.5 seconds, there could usually be a tip-in. That's about enough time to quickly just, get a lob pass going towards the rim, tip the ball in, and you're going to overtime. But then all of a sudden, you look when the Raptors come on the floor to try to tie the game, and you just remember, oh crap, the Boston Celtics have 7'7" Taco Fall, the tallest player in the NBA right now. If you don't remember him, if you watched the slam dunk contest from earlier this season in February, Aaron Gordon of the Orlando Magic brought him in out of nowhere. He was like, bring in Taco, literally out of the crowd for his final dunk, and he dunked over the 7'6", 7'7" Taco Fall, and still, he didn't end up winning the dunk contest, which no one understood. But anyway, that's not the point. So Brad Stevens decides to bring in Taco Fall to guard the 6-foot-tall Kyle Lowry on the inbound pass. And this is where a lot of the conversation sparked up from last night's game about the fact, who would you specifically blame for the Boston Celtics losing this Game 3? Because if they would have won this Game 3, they would have absolutely had a commanding 3-0 series lead on the Raptors, and I think they maybe would have ended up sweeping the series, maybe ended up winning in 5. And they ended up putting Taco Fall on Kyle Lowry, which obviously that's a fine move. Even if Taco Fall hasn't played any basketball in this series, you're going to put the 7'7" guy on the ball. That's no problem. But Brad Stevens decided to play zone. And with him doing that, that actually allowed OG Anunoby, who, by the way, I've spent a lot of time today on this podcast talking a lot about the fact that the Toronto Raptors don't really have any closers on their team. The closest thing they do have to a closer right now, and I probably would have said it actually before last night's game, is OG Anunoby. This kid is playing absolutely out of his mind right now, and that started really before last night's game. When you look at his 3 games in this series, last night, 45 minutes, 3 of 5 from 3, and a total of 12 points. Game 2, 38 points. 38 minutes, 7 of 12 from the field, 20 points. And then in game 1, 33 minutes, 1 of 3 from 3, and 12 points. This is a guy that is going to be a very important piece to this Toronto Raptor team. He is one of the better young defenders in the NBA. If you remember, his rookie season was actually LeBron James's final season in Cleveland when they faced off against the Toronto Raptors in that playoff series when, the LeBronto NBA 2K jersey started coming out and LeBron hit that crazy fade runner over Anunoby. The fact that you're a rookie guarding LeBron James in a playoff series, the kid from Indiana is earning himself some high praise. So he ends up hitting the game-winning 3-point shot last night. If you haven't seen the shot, I highly suggest you check it out as soon as possible. Kyle Lowry just, chucked the ball over Taco Fall. It's one of the more impressive passes I've really seen since I've started watching basketball. Anunoby sinks the shot, and somehow, some way, the Toronto Raptors end up winning Game 3 of this series, making it 2-1 Boston. And people have asked me a couple of things. One, why did that happen? Would you blame Brad Stevens? And my answer is this. I would be a little bit upset at Brad Stevens if I were a Celtic fan. There was no reason to play a zone there whatsoever. At the worst, you have Toronto tie the game and let it go to overtime. At the same time, it took an absolutely impressive pass by Kyle Lowry. It took an absolutely incredible shot by Anunoby to make it. And the Boston Celtics, for the second game in a row, did not play a very good third quarter. And they had plenty of opportunities throughout this game to kind of, take it from Toronto. And unfortunately for them, they could not do that. So now Toronto trails 2-1 in this series. As I said at the beginning of this segment, last year, Toronto was down 2-0 to the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals and ended up winning 4 games in a row. And we know what ended up happening in terms of their playoff run from there. But people have asked me now, do you think the Celtics are in trouble considering they may have just really blown this game? And for me, the answer is no. I'm still sticking with my prediction for the Boston Celtics to win this series. Before the series started, I picked it in 7. I think it's going to be in 6. I think the Celtics come out and win Game 4. I just think throughout the last 3 games, we have consistently seen that they are the better team. And as much as I love OG Anunoby, Toronto just doesn't really have enough shot making to step up and compete with these guys. They barely won, and Jason Tatum did not have a good game last night. Kemba Walker was good, but he's been better. Same with Jaylen Brown. He tweeted after the game last night that it was his fault that they lost, and he was really the guy, along with Jason Tatum, that got caught on that switch on Anunoby, and that's how he ended up making and was set up for that open 3. But it's going to be a very interesting thing to see what happens between these two teams. I think the winner of this series, no matter who they play, whether it's Toronto, whether it is whether it's Milwaukee, whether it's Miami, will have a serious shot to go to the NBA Finals. The more you watch the Bucks during these playoffs and in the bubble, the more you realize that the Eastern Conference is just very wide open, and Boston and Toronto has been a great series so far, and I wholeheartedly expect that to continue.